Okay, good morning and welcome back to Mudwalkers. My name is Chris. If you're not already subscribed here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment below, all the things. It'll help me with the algorithm. On Vimeo, hit me with the follow, hit the follow button for me. I also have all my social media links in the description down below, including my Naturist event group on Facebook. We don't have events yet, but they're coming. If you'd like to support me financially, there is a link for that in the description down below with Patreon. And it's free to click the link and just check it out. And maybe down the line, the link will mind control you to supporting me financially. Ooh, I do need the money, but you know, it's not a huge deal if you don't. It's your money and you do with it what you want. Just please give it to me. So in discussing naturism with Christians, there are lots of passages that come up right away, but there are some that come up less frequently. This is one that comes up with decent frequency, but it's not one that's a given for a, definite rule. It's more of a general moral concept that they then try to apply to naturism. And the problem with this verse is that the rule that we get from it comes from a very old English translation that isn't very well suited to the modern form of the English language. Here's the verse. Abstain from all appearance of evil. The problem with this is that that doesn't really represent what the passage is getting at in modern English. I think that the ESV and the NIV do it better. Also the Christian Standard Bible. These translations either say every form of evil or every kind of evil. And this is a much better representation of what the passage is getting at in the Greek, because what Paul is talking about isn't appearing as if you're doing something wrong, avoiding every instance of that. That's not what he's getting at. What he's talking about is whether that evil is in the shape of a woman, whether that's shaped like a car you want to steal, whether that's shaped like whatever form the evil is taking at the moment, whatever shape that temptation is in currently, abstain from it. It's that simple. Whatever form of evil it is that you're tempted to engage in, whatever type of sin, just don't do it. We are rapidly approaching the 1,000 subscriber mark, which is an important metric for monetization here on YouTube. But you know what? Even if YouTube decides that they don't want to monetize naturist content creators, by golly, I'm going to be just fine because I have patrons over on Patreon. Here they are. Guys, thank you so much for everything you're doing on Patreon. You're making my content possible. You're keeping my work sustainable. I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing. If you would like to support what I do, there's a link for that down in the description below. There's also a link tree for all my social media and whatnot. Go ahead and check all those things out. Like I said, Patreon is making Mudwalkers happen. There's a Zoom call, a video call every month, usually the last Saturday of the month, where all of our $10 patrons get to come together and have a nice time to hang out and have conversations, share stories, and swap ideas. It's great. Honestly, I think that's my favorite part of having patrons is that video call. I'm getting to meet and rub shoulders with naturists from around the world I never would have met otherwise. I tend not to travel. I usually stay right around the Baton Rouge area. So this is giving me an opportunity to really, really share ideas and learn from other naturists, which is great. I enjoy it. Now, back to the video. So one of the problems we run into with this conventional interpretation is that if it does mean that you have to avoid any instance of looking like you're doing something wrong, then a lot of our biblical heroes are condemned by this because they were really unrepentant about it. Let's start small. Let's look at King David. Right? He danced before the Lord in a linen ephod, which struck his wife as something bad to do. I have a whole video about that story right here. But ultimately, David is vindicated, and the author of the passage, in my opinion, seems to support David's actions. So the appearance of David doing something, less savory than his wife thought, doesn't mean that what he did was wrong. Having the appearance of that didn't condemn what he did. Then you have the Old Testament prophets, which were constantly in trouble with their culture because a lot of the stuff that God asked the prophets to do and say appeared evil to Israel. And Israel, they were God's people. That was like the redemptive center of God's work in the Old Testament, was Israel. They were God's people. So Isaiah went and did a bunch of things, and Jeremiah said and did a bunch of things that looked bad to the Israelites, but they did them anyway, and we don't condemn them for that. Then you have Daniel. When Daniel was in it was Babylon, right? Mm-hmm. Then we have Daniel. When Daniel was in Babylon, he went through a whole succession of kings before Daniel died. And one of the things that happened was one of those pagan kings declared it to be unlawful for anyone to pray to any god for a certain set of time. You were only allowed to pray to the king. Well, Daniel didn't pray to no king. Daniel prayed to God. And guess what? They tried to execute Daniel over it. But you know what? God vindicated Daniel because what Daniel had done was good. It wasn't bad, despite the fact that to the pagans it appeared evil. Then we have the apostles, Peter and Paul, in the New Testament. A lot of the things that they did appeared immoral to other people, but they did them, and we praise them for doing them, and they seem to have been rewarded by God for their actions. One example was that Paul associated with Gentiles, and that just does not, that's not wrong. It appeared wrong, publicly to his culture, to his religious community, but he did it anyway. Peter was guilty of the same thing. Peter went and associated with Gentiles in Acts chapter 10, and then in chapter 11 we have the religious Jews getting angry with him over this because what he did appeared evil. But it gets deeper than this. It gets deeper than this. I'm going in a certain order for the Christians in this audience. You go to the Old Testament, and what God does back there sometimes appears evil to the people who observe his actions. Did God do something wrong because he had an appearance of evil? What about Jesus? Read Mark chapters 2 through 4 sometime. A lot of Jesus' ministry revolved around politeness, revolved around making the Pharisees angry. Not because he got his jollies out of upsetting people. That's not the situation. It's because they were doing the wrong thing, and he was doing the right thing. And him doing the right thing upset them. And they thought that the right thing he was doing was actually wrong. Does that mean that what Jesus did was actually evil because it had an appearance of evil to his religious community? No, it doesn't mean that at all. So you see that even on the conventional interpretation, or traditional interpretation, or whatever you want to call it, abstain from anything that even looks evil. It just doesn't hold up, because if you hold to that standard, then God is evil, Jesus is evil, the apostles did evil things that go uncondemned in Scripture, the Old Testament prophets. It just doesn't hold water to the rest of Scripture. But then you also have the problem that modern translations from the Greek into English say form or kind of evil, not appearance. So no, it's not about how people perceive what you do. It's about the actual nature of what you do. That is the key. So with that, the video's over now. I will see you in the next one.